Good afternoon. July 20, sorry, not 20, 31st, 2025, ELEC 1013 Network Cabling class, Pencha College, London, Ontario. All right, so today we're going to talk about the security surveillance systems. And next time I see you will be, well, was Monday. So that lesson is already done online. So I would ask you to please kindly just refer to that to get the fire alarm thing. And if anybody has some questions or anything, please let me know. I'll gladly answer that. As I keep saying, everything that I'm teaching you, I have done. All right. So security surveillance is basically security cameras. Well, right. Get my board on. Give you a little tiny bit of a history, but you're still going to see some of the equipment that way. And yes, there is new retro equipment available for the retrofits of the equipment that's already in existence. If you just want to replace the head end and keep the infrastructure the way it is, maybe a client is satisfied with the way the old cameras work, or they don't want to spend the money on replacing the system completely, but the head end needs to be replaced because it's old, or maybe something is malfunctioning, or, well, for whatever reason. So before we have what we have, we used to have security cameras connected to, well, don't want to go back too much, but I'm just going to go back enough. TDR. All right. Well, TDR means a couple different things for us. Time domain reflectometer. No, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the recording device that was connected to the cameras. And it was, well, the good old VHS system. Those VHS cassettes were being implemented. Now, because depending on the speed that you would choose on that TDR, time domain recorder, you would have to replace those VHS tapes. So the facilities that used to have those security surveillance systems implemented, they would have a shelf in their, whatever the room was chosen for that thing to live in here, the head end. They would have a shelf with a bunch of video cassettes, VHS cassettes. Now, and they would be labeled Monday, Tuesday, all the way through Sunday, or some of them would be labeled Monday day, Monday night, and Tuesday day, Tuesday night, and so on. So whoever was given the responsibility of taking care of the video surveillance, well, their job was, first thing that they come to work, they would just go to the video surveillance room and switch the cassette. And you could have a week worth of video materials if you bought enough cassettes for a week, day and night. Or you could have more. You could have 3 weeks. You just have more cassettes to go through, more videotapes. How was this thing being recorded? Where does the time domain recording start? I think we're recording. Yes, we are recording. Okay. Let's say the system would have 4 cameras. Although the systems were divided by 4 cameras, 8 cameras, 16 cameras, 32 cameras. Right? And then there will be some bigger systems that were able to accommodate more. However, with the time domain recorders, it would not be recommended to have more than 16 per device. So if you had more cameras within the facility, it was a school or a bank or some other bigger facility that they required maybe 64 cameras or whatever, they would just get more of those machines. Why is it that it would not be recommended to get more than 16 per device? Because the time domain, time sharing was implemented. It's the multiplexing, time division multiplexing was implemented while recording that. Let's say, just to make it simple, let's say we have 4 cameras. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, and camera 4. The way that TDR used to work is that it would record a little bit of camera 1, a little bit of camera 2, camera 3, and camera 4, and then it would start recording again, camera 1, 2. It would just switch between those 4 cameras. And because the switching was happening extremely fast, fast enough, you could just press which camera you want to view. 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you would see that camera on the monitor. Right? I'm just going to have rabbit ears here. Monitor. Right. All right. So the TDR was able to search for just the time it would align itself to just present the camera number 1 and just give it to you for the viewing. Yes, it would be, depending on the quality you would choose, all of the recordings, the playback of the recording, obviously it was a little choppy, almost like a strobe motion, because you would lose that time for camera 2, 3, and 4, and they would start viewing 1 again, but it would be presented just that one. So yes, some of the motion would be choppy. So the less of the cameras you had to go through for that time division multiplexing, the better the picture was. So 16 was, you didn't want more than 16 cameras because the images would get quite choppier, quite a bit choppy. So that was the time domain. I keep saying reflectometer, recorder, and they would implement the VHS tapes. Now, those you are not going to see implemented anymore because you just won't. They were popular still in the year 2000. So 25 years ago, that was it. Then maybe 10 years later, the DVRs, digital video recorder, was implemented. So the tapes were eliminated and the DVR, just separate that thing here. Oh, there's interruption here. Sorry to interrupt. Is there a makeup lab? Okay, I will be there tomorrow. And if you want to make up some lab, go ahead. We can do that. So if you still have, because this time is designated for those 3 labs, the coaxial cable, the nose prep, and the fusion splice for the fiber optics. I don't think there's anyone left that hasn't done that yet. So I think we're all pretty much caught up. Maybe there's one person or two. So yep, please show up. I'm going to take care of you. But if you want to do some other labs, go ahead, be my guest. Just do it so you can do it quicker than later. That's fine too. Though next week we're going to do the mechanical splice. Then yeah. So if I have only lab 12, should I? Yeah. By all means, yeah. Show up. Well, the more you can do earlier, the better, because who knows? Maybe you're going to get sore throat or something like that. Then, yeah, do it if you can. Just do it. Yeah, good. Nice. All right. So the DVRs would implement a hard drive instead of there's a hard drive instead of the videotape, and that was a pretty good step up because you didn't have to deal with those tapes, and well, some of the images were already better. But were they better? I would say some of the earlier DVRs and the latest TDRs, the quality of the images, depending on how you set things up. Of course, if you set the speed of the tape, because you could change the speed of the recording to 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever. There were few options on that, depending on who was making those things. You would give different kind of options. So of course, if you were recording 24 hours, the tape speed would be slower, so the recording would be of a less quality than if you had the speed of the tape faster. So then when the digital video recorders came on board, and the hard drives would be implemented. No need for the tapes. So that means you would not have to arrive every morning and replace those tapes. And yes, there will be situations when the person who is taking care of that, maybe they got pulled off to some other duties or something that needed immediate attention, and they'll just forget to change the tapes. Yes, there would be situations like that. Right? Now, in this case here, there would not be any situation like that because this hard drive would just keep recording, and you would set up the quality versus the quantity as far as the video that's recorded. Now, of course, if you would set up to, and over here you would have things like a week's worth of recording, 2 weeks worth of recording, or maybe sometimes if you set up really poor quality for playback, you would have a month before the hard drive runs out and starts recycling and erasing the data that was the furthest from this date going back. So it would the hard drive would just work constantly. Now, some of the earlier hard drives were not as good quality that what we have now. So all that stuff. Still, what was in question was the type of compression that was used. So some of the biggest sales features were in some of the stores. They would say, "Oh, look how clear the picture is. See the cars driving, people walking, beautiful." Yes, but it was just a live viewing of whatever the cameras are seeing. The question was, how good is the recorded image after you play it back? And then they would be quite different. The recorded image would be, you know how it is. Sometimes you would have a hard time recognizing somebody's face when they were standing 3 feet away from the camera, depending on how the quality was set up. So that was the earlier ones. And as time went along, the quality started getting better, and better. So the cameras were better, and the compression that's being used to store the information. So in order to save space on hard drive, a certain type of a compression of the signal would be implemented in order to maybe just interpolate some pixels between others, and maybe some still images. Maybe it's not if nothing is happening, so some it would not take as much memory as normally it would if we would just keep recording and things like that. So different types of now the compression types have improved a lot since the earlier days. So yes, the images look better, but as long as the client understands, depending on where you buy the system, I personally prefer buying it from the distributors mm, um, that is their job to sell that equipment. I would not buy this thing at just a local some sort of a department store because for that the companies come, they go. It's difficult to get the technical support and all that stuff. So I prefer buying this equipment at the distributors that actually specialize in this type of stuff. Right? So the DVR stands for digital video recorder. Eliminate the tapes and have the hard drive. Of course, with that digital technology, what was implemented again would be at the back. It would be the Ethernet port. All right. All right. So you could plug that device into the Ethernet network, into LAN, or you could plug it into your switch or modem. If it was home setup, you would plug this thing right into your whatever the equipment you have. And if you were commercial setting, you most likely would plug that into the switch. And of course, there would be menus with the setup on who you want to allow to view the recordings, who you want to allow to access this thing remotely, in order to actually you could remotely get the recording out of it, and you could manipulate this whole system remotely from your cell phone. Earlier, once the cell phones were not as well sophisticated as we have now, you would operate that thing from your PC somewhere else, or from your laptop, or things like that. Not even a tablet, because some of the tablets were not that popular at that time. You're talking about late 2000s. Okay? Uh, so but you would have to install the app, and later on it was possible to do this without the need of installing an app. You would just go through the web browser. Uh, both systems are being used now, some of them through web browser, some of them you have to download and install an app to your device. Now you could do it on a tablet, in your cell phone, and you can live view your cameras at home, or you can actually, if there's something that you're interested in, you can specify the time from time to, and you can download that video right to your cell phone or right to your laptop or whatever, if you are not at home. So digital video recorder, it had the capability of plugging this thing into the network. Then, as time went along, the NVR came on board. NVR is a DVR with the network plug or a jack. Well, so what's the difference between NVR and DVR? The acronym. All right. Because since the DVRs, they have the jack for the network, it could be called NVR. But some people decided to call their things NVR. And someone might argue, okay, because NVR, you can plug into the network. Well, you can also plug in the DVR to the network. So what gives, right? Exactly. Okay. So NVR stands for Network Video Recorder. And the only difference could be that since NVRs came a little bit later, so the technology could be a little bit different, a little bit better. But the whole idea of operation is just the same. There's a hard drive and there's a hard drive. Things can be plugged into the network. And there are some free available services or servers that you can install on your phone, and then you can view your cameras and operate your DVR or NVR remotely. You don't have to pay. Some of the manufacturers that sell these, they offer servers, but you have to pay monthly or something like that. So, but even if they offer that, you can still download some of the apps for free, and you can view things live. I'm not going to mention any of those servers because I don't want to advertise, but if you want to talk to me, I'll tell you, right? In person. Okay. Now, when it comes to types of the cameras, where's my thing? Here it is. Okay. Cameras. The earlier cameras that were implemented in the TDR, time domain recorder, it would be a camera. Here. And here's the lens. Quite primitive camera, right? Now, at the back, besides other controls, it would have a BNC jack, and BNC jack is if when you go to any of our labs, and if you look at the inputs to the oscilloscopes, that's the type of jack. It's called BNC. That's where you plug in the probe. Now, to that BNC, there would be a coaxial cable connected with a BNC connector, and that thing would be connected to the BNC, and this would provide us the video signal. Things would go only one way. All right, video. Also, there would be terminals for power. And depending on who would make the camera, it would be 24 volt DC, 24 volt AC, or 18 volt, different voltages were specified. Well, you would plug in a twin cable, would be mostly 18-2 or 16-2 stranded cable. That on the other side, you would plug that into the power. Now, some people would try to plug in the transformer that would provide that power locally where the cameras would be, which was a bad idea because some of the cameras would be some further from the NVR or DVR. And those hydro outlets would be on different electrical panels, which would create something that's called a ground loop, which would mean that the neutral is not exactly at the same potential. Could be slight difference in the voltage between one neutral and the other, depending on where the receptacle is. And that would manifest itself in the video noise. It would be you would see some stripes running up and down or things like that. You would see noise. So it was always a good idea to get the power from one kind of source. So you could run two cables, a coaxial cable and maybe 16-2 to provide the power. So in that case, for the video purposes, some of the engineers developed something that's called a Siamese cable, just like Siamese twins. And the cable would contain a coaxial cable and 16-2 stranded cable in one jacketing. And So you just would have to run one Siamese cable to every camera, and over there you would have coaxial cable for the video, and you would have the stranded pair for the power. Or you could, of course, you could just run two cables, and sometimes it was happening as well. Right? Some of these types of cameras are still this will be like a composite video because this composite signal. Some of the cameras are still operational. You can still buy new cameras of that type. They look a little bit more modern, but they operate like that. Why? Because some of the systems still are being installed, and sometimes somebody doesn't want to replace the whole thing, maybe just because they don't want to spend the money, excuse me, or maybe they're satisfied with that, whatever it is. But sometimes you need to replace the head end that accommodates this type of signal. So you would get an NVR or DVR, and I keep using those terms interchangeably, and frankly, the whole industry does as well. So as I'm talking about NVR and DVR, okay? So you can buy a new system. Now, you can also buy hybrid systems that would accommodate the composite video, because this is called composite video. Composite video is because there's more than one signal in that video signal. So there's RGB, red, green, blue information, and there is some synchronization pulses and luminance, chrominance, and all that stuff. So there's few signals composed into one signal, so it's a composite signal. Not to be confused with the modulated cable TV, because that's a composite video modulated into a channel. That's different. That's taking it one step further, so you can have many channels. But the composite video, yes, you can also buy hybrid NVRs that you would have the BNC connectors for whatever number of cameras you would have for the composite video. And you would also have some Ethernet jacks that you could plug in the IP cameras, which we're going to talk about next, that implement the Ethernet cable, Cat5e minimum. Or they would have just one Ethernet jack into which you would plug in a switch with a bunch of Ethernet jacks, switch or a hub, but switch, and you would plug in one of those to one of the ports, and all the other ports would be plugged in to the cameras. Which brings me to the next point, is that how does the NVR know which camera is supposed to be placed on the viewing grid of the monitor? All right? There's camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, and so on. If you plug in straight into the BNC connectors, the system will intuitively place those onto different squares on the grids, those views. Here's the front door, here's the side door, here's the garage, whatever. Okay? But also, and if you have individual Ethernet jacks and you plug in those to each individual cameras, for the most part, the system will intuitively place those into the viewing grid. But if you have one port and plug that thing into the switch, and you plug in the cameras to the switch, then it only works on the IP cameras, Internet Protocol cameras that implement the Ethernet signal. Then they have the IP addresses. Those cameras do have the IP addresses or MAC addresses, but mostly for the IP. And then you have to manually go into the programming of the DVR or NVR and tell which camera, based on the IP address, which camera you want to have on this square, that square, and so on. So there are different ways of placing it. The industry is going more towards this type of solution anyways. However, you can still buy some of the smaller systems, like 4 cameras, up to 8 cameras that would have only 8 or 4 of those Ethernet jacks. You plug and play. Just get an Ethernet cable and plug it in to the Ethernet port on the camera and to the Ethernet port on the NVR. Boom. The whole thing happens itself. It just places those camera 1, camera 2, and so on. Which brings me to the, remember that one here? PoE. Okay. Power over Ethernet. So most of the NVRs or DVRs that have those individual Ethernet jacks, each Ethernet jack will provide the signal communication between the camera and the DVR. And in this case, the signal goes both ways because some of the control signals go from the DVR to the camera, and some of the video signals, of course, goes the other way. So there's a bunch of communication going on through those Ethernet ports. Now, cameras have to be powered. Here's an example of an Ethernet IP camera. That this one is called like a Tourette camera. There's some of the bullet cameras, different cameras. And notice you see here the Ethernet jack, and over here you also see the power jack. Of course, you can run a separate power cable to the power here, or you can, if you can find an outlet or have an outlet installed in the proximity of the camera, you can plug in the transformer and have the power from there. And because it's a digital information, then for the most part, there is no problem with the noise. It's not an analog type of signal. Or where are we here? Or you can use PoE, power over Ethernet, that in that case, through the Ethernet cable, you get the signal, you get the intelligence being communicated back and forth. And also superimposed, there is power onto that cable, placed onto that cable. So you only have to plug in that Ethernet cable, and well, usually I would just shove it in the ceiling tile, or and usually I would just tape it up just so things don't get in there. So yes, you can just plug in the signal with the PoE and forget about that. The camera is going to get powered by the PoE, power over Ethernet, from the cable. Okay. Now, from that, we go into, that's what an 8-port camera system would look like. Now, over here, you could use a remote control. You could use a mouse that you could plug in here, or you can press the buttons on the equipment itself. And some of them would be play, pause and play, and depending on where you are on the screen. But for the most part, the most convenient, if you're on site there by the equipment, you could use the yeah, hold on, excuse me. Sorry about that. So mouse is the most convenient one when you're on site. Oh, you can see here Ethernet jacks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is an 8-camera system, and you see here there's an another Ethernet jack that plugs in right to the network. And what else do we have? Possibility of connecting a VGA to a monitor or HDMI. And this one does have USB port, another USB port for whatever functionality they provided. And this one even has the RS-232 serial port, which not too many people use anymore. And over here, what you can see is the trigger points, because what you could do, you could set up the camera to record based on a trigger signal being provided. So those sometimes are connected to the motion sensors, and the motion sensor would be placed in the proximity of the camera. And when the motion sensor triggers, that camera is going to be recorded, because you can record continuously, but that takes space on the hard drive. So you have less of a cycle time. If you record continuously, if something happens in the view or nothing happens in the view, the camera is recording on its own track, then you might get maybe a week worth of, depending on the size of the hard drive, let's say a week before the recording recycles and all the information is being erased. Usually within a week. If something happens, the next day, right? But if you connect the if you set up the recording so it's motion based, so the camera only records, or the channel only records on the DVR when there's a motion within that picture, and that motion can be established. The motion detection can be established in two ways. One, it could be by placing a motion sensor close to the camera, or the system can sense a picture being changed. And based on that, it says, okay, there's a motion there. So I'm going to start recording. That motion-based recording usually works, well, after hours. It works best after hours when the building is closed and no one's supposed to be there. So, yeah. But if you place that outside, if it's an outside camera, then the trees moving, grass moving, wind blowing, a bird flies by, a spider crawls by. It treats it. Most of the time, it would be like trees moving, and it would sense something is changing in the picture, and it's going to record based on motion. So so that's the basic things. And of course, what you could do, and in larger buildings, the next solution that I'm going to show you is implemented, because here, if you have the 8 cameras or 4 cameras or 16 cameras, you could just plug in the Ethernet cable from the camera into the channel, from the camera into another channel, and so on. You can have 8 cameras, plug it in, and very little setup is required, because those cameras are going to be placed on the viewing grid on the monitor as camera 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now, you could plug in to the network. So you can plug this in right to the network, and you can plug in a switch to the network. But then you have to start programming things. You have to start assigning, you have to search for the IP addresses of the cameras. So sometimes you can detect the IP address on the camera, or sometimes you have to just take the camera and look at it. Can I see this here? Is there a sticker somewhere there? No, there's no. But on the other side, it would be like a sticker with the information, the MAC address and the IP address on that. So you can set up things this way here. Here would be the main recording spot. It will be the main DVR, the brain of the system. And when you have a larger facility, you can have like remote switches. So you will have one switch placed in some sort of area. Into that switch, you would bring the cameras and plug them in. it is recommended that those switches are PoE switches with the possibility of power over Ethernet. This way, you just plug in one cable, Ethernet cable, and it's so with the PoE. When you're choosing the switch, you have to make sure that the PoE that is available on the jack is the same type of PoE that the camera requires. For the most part, it's 48 volts DC on certain pins, and that's sort of like a standard, but of course, well, it's not a crime to develop your own equipment with slightly different standards, and some companies do. So you gotta make sure that this is actually 48 volts DC on certain pins, and not 24 volts, for example. And also, you need to make sure that the power on the PoE overall for the switch can handle the power that each camera and all of them combined are going to drain from that. So when you're buying that, you need to consider these things. Right? And then in other area, you can set up another sub switch. If those are far enough, you can connect that to a media converter, which is going to convert to a fiber optics signal, and then another media converter that's going to convert that back. And you can connect it to another switch, which is plugged into that main DVR. And maybe there would be certain UPS, which stands for uninterrupted power supplies, connected to the main NVR, or maybe some other ones, and possibility of some external hard drives for because when you have a lot of cameras, that's a lot of video signal that is continuously being recorded, and you want to keep it for at least a week. 2 weeks is pretty good. And before we end today, I just want to bring to your attention, when you're buying the equipment of that sort, do not get excited on how clear and beautiful the image is when you're viewing it live. Ask for the recorded image to be presented, and then try to set up for the highest quality and see if all the system that you have with many cameras or not as many cameras, to see what quality of a signal you're going to have, the recorded signal. The other things that make or break a good system is the searching abilities. You gotta make sure that the system that you're buying, you can quite comfortably search out a certain spot when something happens. Because some of the less expensive devices, you would not have like a motion-based search. Or you could set up, let's say, where's my board? There's my board. All right, let's say there's a viewing monitor. Okay. And you have a bunch of cameras. So you could double click on one image and you have one huge image on the monitor from that particular camera. And let's say something has happened last night, or maybe somebody notices that something happened 2 days or 3 days ago. What are you going to do? You're going to go back 3 days ago to the morning of 3 days ago, and you're going to watch it for 3 days, possibly, until you notice that something happens. That's not something you want to do. Now, there's a possibility of fast forwarding, so you can play these things in fast motion, but still, that involves you sitting and staring at the monitor and not being able to look anywhere else because you might miss it. But some of the better systems, you could just select the area on the screen because maybe there's a doorknob of a door and somebody opened the door. So just okay, select the area and press the button, and it's going to search for the motion in that particular part of the screen for the last 3 days. And then you go have a coffee. And after you're done with the coffee, it comes back with a bunch of entries, so you could go to that spot and view the time. So that's what you want. So the quality of the image is one. And the other thing is how quickly you can search things out, among other things. But the quality of the image is the number one. Then the search capabilities is another one. And of course, the installer friendly functions, such as how easy is it to configure this thing? How easy is it to set up this system so the client can see, uh, can view things and operate that from their cell phone when they're away from home, things like that. So there's other things, and of course there's some other bells and whistles that matter less than. Why? What is the purpose of that? Is that if something happens, you're able to see it with a good quality and quickly. And it's not like in the movies, because in the movies there are sharp images. You can see the color of the person's eyes. No, it's not happening like that. The clients have to know what they're buying, and if they really want to have sharp images, then of course it takes, it costs more money. And if somebody wants to have a cheap solution, then I always try to convince them, no, don't go cheap. And sometimes they listen to me, sometimes they don't. But if they don't, I usually prefer not to do business with that person, because if you get a cheap system, a lot of those things that you take for granted that you think you should have, you don't, and they'll be calling me every 2 weeks or maybe every week that something has to be, then what, you're going to start charging them money for every visit? You should, right? But that's not how it works. So quite a couple times in my whole time that I've been doing all kinds of things like this, a couple of times I said, yes, if you really want me to install that thing that you bought somewhere at some store, then yes, I can install that. But once it's installed, I leave. Please don't call me, okay? Because I just won't be able to support you, because that's the way things are when you buy things from like a department store. All right. Is there any more slides that we have that we can go through? Typical surveillance system with digital video recorder and remote offsite viewing. Well, okay, so we have a DVR, and in this case, you have 4 cameras connected to it. 4 camera is a very popular system for residential, because how many cameras do you want? Oh, camera here, camera. They count 9 cameras. Okay, well, the systems go 4 cameras, 8 cameras, 16. So if you want 9 cameras, you're going to have to buy a 16, and it costs accordingly more. So once they start hearing the price, they go, okay, we don't need that many cameras, just here and here and here, right? So that's those cameras are connected here. What is connected? A local monitor. It is connected to the internet through the Ethernet port. That will be this one right here. And from the internet, you can view it from remote devices or your PC at home, through the same network or through the internet. And of course, you should familiarize yourself with all the features and the programming and the installation before you install that. And of course, that's why I prefer installing systems that I buy at the distributors, because they organize periodical training sessions by the manufacturers. You can actually talk to the people from the manufacturer. You have a telephone number for tech support, because sometimes you still need to call and find out how do you do that particular thing, because something's giving me a hard time as far as configuration and whatnot. So that's why I prefer to have solid supplier, distributor. And if we need some other parts, we need more cameras, or something went bad and you need to replace a camera, you can still buy that camera, providing that this system was not installed 20 years ago, then of course even the distributors might not have the same equipment. All right, so more. All right, security surveillance cabling. When it comes to using PoE, remember Cat5e is minimum. Now you can't even 2025. It's easier to get Cat6 than Cat5e at the stores. So Cat6, of course, yeah. Cat6, yes, of course, it's going to work. All right. So that's it for the surveillance part. And I'm going to see some of us tomorrow on Friday. Right? And if I don't, for those who don't, please enjoy your weekend. And as I keep saying, I'll see you when I see you. Thank you for your attention.